So we have ourselves a murder mystery on Sunday nights on HBO, and we're going to be talking about it here on Pulp Mythos. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We're going to be talking about this every Sunday night throughout the run of the show. It's 5 more weeks. I'm Brian here with Spencer and Larry, and we do all kinds of different reviews. We do Fargo on Mondays. We're going to be doing The Mandalorian starting Friday. We have our final review for The Haunting of Bly Manor, which will go up later this week. Lots of other content coming. There's content uh, that's already on the channel. If you have not yet watched Raised by Wolves, please do so. It's on HBO Max. It's an amazing show. We did reviews for all of that. So yeah, definitely check out the channel if you have not. As I said, we're going to be talking about this murder mystery. The show is called The Undoing. The first episode is also called The Undoing. This is episode 1, and I thought it was decent. As far as the first episode, basically they spend the first half setting up all the characters, and then bam, the murder mystery. What did you guys feel about the pacing? Some people were saying, sort of that slow burn. I know there's been different discussions as far as the pacing of the show. We can only obviously base it off the first episode. But are you liking it? Are you not liking it? What are your immediate thoughts as far as the pacing of the first episode?
I don't have any issues with the pacing of it so far. I think that knowing it's 6 episodes, they're trying to draw you in. So I'm thinking of it as a really long movie. Knowing that it's going to be start to finish 6 episodes.
That's a good point. A long movie, yeah.
So I'm trying to take it in as they're trying to set up the characters, maybe a little bit longer than they would on a movie because, you have less time. But I felt like there's a lot of things that it's almost it's a whodunit, but I think a lot of it is trying to point you in certain directions. So there's a lot of little hints through the episode, which I think is important. So to me, once I'm done with the whole series, I might watch it again just to be like, oh, well, shit, this pointed to this part here, which I do a lot of times when I watch these kind of movies or shows.
Well, yeah, it was just it was a good setup, and that's basically what it was because we got the premise of the show itself, which there's a murder mystery here, there's a missing person, how does this all connect? We just really at this point had enough time to just kind of establish our cast of characters, and the relationships and everything. As far as being a setup, it was pretty decent. They've got my attention.
The lead character is played by Nicole Kidman, and that is Grace Fraser. They kept was Fraser.
Right?
Yeah, because there's the way it was spelled was throwing me, and then a few people sounded like they were pronouncing it different. I don't know.
I heard her say Fraser, like Fraser Crane.
Yeah, that's what I heard
over and over. That's what I heard, but the spelling was there's no I, so I don't know.
Grace, and this other character, her husband is played by Hugh Grant, and that is Jonathan, and then they have a son, Henry. So the first literally I forgot to mention the opening credits. Very upbeat and just sort of nice and pleasant. The show kicks in. It's this family. Well, there's sort of that grim scene, but you don't really see what happens. Then it jumps into the family, the Fraser family. And it's just the typical, well, not typical because they're super rich, obviously, but this family who lives in Manhattan. The son goes to private school, $50,000 a year to attend this school. His mother is a therapist. Father, yeah, in Manhattan. They even make a reference, one of the clients, to how ridiculously priced her sessions are. Hugh Grant's character, Jonathan, he's a doctor. He works with cancer patients, specifically children. So they make a lot of money. Their kid, goes to a nice school. And we basically just sort of get this family dynamic. Everything seems really nice. There's no real conflict. The kid wants a dog. His dad doesn't. He says he's allergic. The kid makes a shake, but he doesn't clean up, and it upsets the mom. Jonathan and Henry go on a nice walk to school. It's all pleasant. It doesn't appear that there's any cracks in that family, and clearly that was on purpose to set up the drama to come later.
I think that it shows also not only how much money they make, but look where they live. They live right next to Central Park. You know, he
Yes.
walked his kid to school through Central Park. I was like, holy shit, how much did that cost to have a window view of Central Park in New York City? So, you talk about a lot of money. Their house was pretty good sized, but to me, knowing the proximity of their quarters shows also how much money they had. And like you
Right.
said, it shows to me the how successful Hugh Grant was in rom coms all this time was played up at the beginning of this because he's like laughing and joking and saying like little suave things. Like you said, knowing that it's going to be a murder mystery and then having it start the way it did was a little almost derailed me a little bit. I was like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, like you said, they're clearly very affluent given where they're at and everything, and it also is shown in the kind of the company they keep, the people they're friends with, and everything, and just the fact that their kid can afford to go to that school, and unlike the other kid who we're sure, well, at least I'm sure will be a big part of this show.
Miguel.
Miguel, yes, he's not going there off of a scholarship or anything. His parents can just afford to pay enough to send him there.
Yeah, and Henry, plays violin, and he's the product of two very wealthy parents. They even talk about it within the context of the show. The parents are discussing whether or not they should stay in Manhattan. The fact Grace is like, we live in a bubble. Our son is not aware of the real world. He's protected. Is that good for him or not? And they sort of have that discussion. So even within the show, even the characters themselves are, discussing the fact that they definitely live a nice life.
Yeah,
I was thinking though, but not just the wealthy part of New York. If you live in New York, it's your own little bubble anyway. Even no matter which part you live in. So, like, if you live in the middle income area, well, I don't know if there is
I'll
a
say
middle
there some
income area
bubbles are
in New
much
York.
nicer than other bubbles in New York.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
There is a
the not nice
difference.
bubbles and then the really rich bubbles that we also saw. But I think that people don't venture a lot outside of their bubbles within that city because it is like small cities within a much larger city, depending on where you're at.
Well, yeah, and like Brian said, it's very dependent. It's very dependent on what part of New York you're in. I mean, and you could say that we're all kind of in our own bubbles because everybody think the world is essentially as it is in their hometown and their neighborhood. But yeah, she was mentioning that Henry's growing up in a bubble and that's not good for him and etc. And that's a good point because I thought his behavior was a little weird this episode, at least when they learned about the murder and everything. Just some of the questions he asked, and
I agree.
yeah, he was a little cold and callous about it.
Uh, it's also interesting that this is clearly a non-COVID world. You know what I mean? It is weird now. I think we've talked about that, how shows are going to have to change, next year as far as are they, going to acknowledge, the difference in the world. I don't know, but it is funny. Clearly, it's a non-COVID.
Well, I don't
Man.
think that they will show it. I mean, the fact that they're doing so much work to kind of, test on sets and do this stuff, to me, as I don't know, I watched Barbarians. I didn't watch all of it yet. I just wanted to try it. But I started The Magicians. I was done with a couple other shows. So I was like, well, let me try these ones out. It is to me, being able to see their mouth, that helps with emoting and everything else. Also, Barbarians is a German show, so I'm watching it, dubbed, which is, God, that's hard. But, you know, being able to look at their mouth is a big deal because it's seeing expressions with just the eyes is hard. Didn't Tom Hardy did that where he did a bunch of movies where he wanted to cover his mouth so that he would be a better actor. So I think that if they did something like that in this time frame, you would realize that there's a lot of people who are just pretty and not very good actors.
Like, well, like, yeah, I get what you're saying, and it definitely it's nice to escape from the realities of what we're dealing with right now too. It's like I like Mad Max as much as the next guy, but everything doesn't need to You know,
Beat Mad Max.
yeah,
That's true. I was just thinking in terms of, after like 9/11, any show, especially that took place in New York, addressed it or
well,
had to reference it, or, it was a different world.
I get what you're
Uh,
saying. Like, at what point does film and television reflect reality in this way instead of, just kind of being an example of how things were in the before times.
I think it might be. You look at TV shows or even movies, they might, start where the beginning of the film is like the end of people wearing masks. Like they're taking masks off when they get home, and then, kind of doing a 28 days later, but it's taking place nowish. And I think that this
Spence,
pandemic will spawn some movies, but
I was about to say Spencer in his far future films that he's talking about, people taking off masks.
the So the conflict of the piece is obviously the murder of Elena, a character that we're introduced to at a meeting. Like you said, Grace is at a meeting. There's a bunch of moms. They're setting up an auction, and we are introduced to a character. And there's a very it's not really it wasn't an awkward scene until they shot it to be awkward. But there's a breastfeeding scene, and the way the camera moves, the way the characters react, they build this scene up as if there's something else going on here. Is there even the moms themselves are calling each other and gossiping about how brazen Elena is uh, in that particular moment. It's setting up clearly something between Grace and Elena. And let me jump to the next scene, and then you guys can go in. We meet her later at the gym. She walks up to Grace. She's completely nude, and they have a little conversation. There's some looking back and forth. It appears if there's some kind of attraction going on there. That's not what's important. What's important is several scenes later when Grace is having another flashback, remembering that scene, and we start seeing stuff that we didn't see before, almost as if even the character is hiding stuff from the audience. What did you
Yeah.
think about that?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, and that did make me wonder. It's like, okay, are we in a unreliable narrator scenario, or what's
That's
going on here?
exactly where I'm
Like,
going with that. Yeah.
are we seeing an example of how Grace has shaped this in her head, and then are we seeing after that how the scene actually happened?
I think that that's a possibility. This early on, I'm not going to back that 100% because I have a couple theories of my own at the moment, but I'm not 100% sure that that's not at least partially correct. I think that, and we talked about the attractive stuff because Larry said, did you get, a hint of any of that prior to the gym scene? And I told him, I was like, I've seen the different, cosmos type things where they say that some of the attraction you can tell if someone's into you or not is if they're looking at your mouth instead of your, face, or if they make prolonged eye contact. Like all these signs that someone's into somebody, she was doing to Grace. Like Elena was constantly doing to Grace. And then when she started breastfeeding, it's not like she just took her shirt off and did it. She was staring at Nicole Kidman while she was getting ready to breastfeed, and they continued to stare at her. So it wasn't, to me, if it was like a fuck you to the group, she would have been staring at each one of them, being like, what, you got something to say? But she was intentionally doing it to Grace. So to me, does that show that she has an issue with Grace? Is it something that happened? Or is there some part of the story we don't know yet? And there's a theory that I have about that too.
That's an interesting thing. I never even thought of. Breastfeeding as a power move. Like is that what you were stating, or that it looked like she may have been doing to the group, if not trying to weirdly, and I do mean weirdly, entice Grace during this scene.
Well, I don't know where you're at, Brian, because I was going to go into my other theory that kind of ties it up. But I think that Grace, there's a scene where Jonathan gets back from the hospital, Hugh Grant, and he lays with his wife, and she's asking, "Hey, how's that kid?" And I don't remember the kid. It was like Shelby something or other.
Yeah,
But
Shelby.
she asked how the child was, and she didn't say nothing, or he didn't say anything. So he's sitting there for a second, but it flashes back to him at the hospital. Well, he's talking to this child, and somebody walks up behind him. So it's insinuating that it's, Grace, but I don't think that it was. I think that it might have been Elena. I think that Elena and Jonathan are tied in because I think perhaps that um, I think that her child may have had cancer.
Hmm.
And that's how her and Jonathan have met. I think that perhaps, you know, Grace, she's trying to pull power moves on Grace. I think that she's trying to fuck with Grace because maybe her and Jonathan, Elena and Jonathan had something going on, the single white female thing or fatal attraction, where she was stalking Jonathan and now she's getting into everything that Grace was into to basically fuck with Grace. So that leads me to believe that Jonathan may not be alive because I think Grace may have killed both of them. She may have killed Jonathan and what's her face, Elena.
Oh, so do you think that you're saying you think that Grace may be her own undoing?
Oh yeah, I think that Grace, and we talked about it too. There was a couple scenes with Grace when she was talking to her patients or her clients. Well, I don't know what her doctor level is, so either way, where when she was talking to the gay couple, it felt like she was manipulating them to believe the narrative that she was spinning. So even when she was talking to the cops, she was saying things, but she felt uncomfortable a little bit, which isn't, you know, unnormal when you're getting interrogated by cops about a murder. I'm not sure that I've never been interrogated by the cops about murder, but I imagine that'd be a little unsettling. But the questions they were asking were very simple, and the cops, the one cop was looking through her shit when she wasn't looking, like it was supposed to be like secretive. So I think they have heard something from somebody else that might implicate her, not necessarily her husband.
And it's the sort of thing where it may have made more sense why she sent her son away as quickly as she did, and wouldn't explain who she was talking to because her son may be eager to come forward with some information or fill in the gaps in some way because she wouldn't even tell her kid that it was cops that she was talking to. That may have put his mind at ease a little bit, and she wouldn't even mention it. She's just like, yeah, I'm just talking to these guys, and she's just trying to shoo him off. Um, so it may have been her trying to weave her own narrative, and she may have been worried about him poking holes in that narrative that she puts together. So yeah, it very well may be the sort of thing where she's definitely guilty, but because she is an unreliable narrator, we're led to believe otherwise by the story.
Well, and I think you just said it too. Her trying to shoo him away. She knows that they got a text message.
Mm-hmm.
Why would she? That wouldn't be the first time that the students got the same text message the parents got. Like that kid's been at that school, I'm assuming for longer. The fact that he knows the orchestra teacher, he's been playing violin for a while. He's been at this school for more than a minute. So you're going to tell me that in New York City, this is the first time that they've ever all received a text about something crazy? Like, so for him to be like, oh yeah, I heard about it. She already knew that he knew
Right.
about the murder. So for her to shoo him away that quickly, like you said, she didn't want him accidentally poking holes in her story.
The auction happens, and we're introduced to Donald Sutherland's character, Franklin, very briefly. Clearly, based on the previews, he's going to be a major player later. He's Grace's father. Um, doesn't do much in this episode, but as I said, if you watch the previews, he's clearly going to be a big part later. But at the auction, we see Elena. A bunch of guys are approaching her. She's talking to them. She gets real. She stares at Grace and perhaps Jonathan, and then she goes to the bathroom. She's crying. she goes to leave, and Grace joins her in the elevator. They go down. She gives her a little kiss, and that's it. And as far as we're told as the audience, that's all. That's the last time Grace saw her. Like I said, as far as we're told, Grace is not Grace. Elena is brutally murdered that very evening. Not just killed. She's bludgeoned to death. Her face is unrecognizable. So whoever killed her, not only did they kill her, there was definite more to it than that. Such a violent murder. But the big twist and what everything was set up. Jonathan is supposed to be at some kind of doctor thing. He's missing. His phone is left at the house, and clearly there's pointing in the direction that was it Jonathan that committed the murder. Where is Jonathan? You guys already talked about a lot of your theories as far as that.
I have one more though. She probably ruined the other Jonathan Frazier's marriage, because if she called a hotel room and some dude who wasn't her husband answered, like that chick who answered the phone was like, "Who's this?" She's like, "I need to speak with Jonathan."
And she's like, "Hold on," and the part we didn't hear was probably, "It's for you, Jonathan."
Who the fuck is this chick calling you at a hotel room?
She's like, "I'm gonna let you take that, and then I'm gonna let you explain yourself."
Yeah, and then she hangs up like 3 seconds later. She didn't even be like, "Oh, my bad." So now it looks extra suspicious because he's on the phone, but the deadline on the other end.
Well, if it is an unreliable narrator scenario, and if she is responsible for this sort all these things, and heck, maybe even responsible for Jonathan being missing to some degree, like, do you think? Well, my thing is, do you think it's do you think that she believes her lies? Is what I'm getting at here.
Too early.
Well, yeah,
Know.
narcissists believe their own lies, but I don't know that a narcissist could convince themselves that they didn't kill the person they just killed. I think that if she's convincing herself of something else, it's not because she's narcissistic or she's believing her lie. It's that she's schizophrenic or batshit fucking crazy.
I only have one more major thing, and that's the dog story. We're told up front that the dog, Hugh Grant, doesn't want a dog because he's allergic. But then we're told later by Grace that it's not that he's allergic. It's that when he was a kid, he had a dog, and it got out and it got hit and killed. And then clearly they're focusing on that story for some reason. We talked about before we started recording different ideas. One of my thoughts was, is she lying? Is this just showing that she's making up a narrative that fits or helps her world and the people in it function properly, or what she considers properly? Or is there something to that story? And you had something, Larry.
Oh, yeah, about whether or not she's making up a story.
Or if the story is true and there's more to Jonathan's character as far as his emotional side.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's the sort of thing where he clearly seemed very depressed. So, he very well may have killed himself, is the thing. Because they talk about all the stress of his work and the story with the dog. And if the story with the dog happened, and with the amount of stress he's under, I mean, if the death of a dog, which, that can be a very emotionally traumatic thing. If that disturbed him that much to the point where, he won't even consider it. He doesn't, he said, and he says to this kid, you can get any other animal, just not a dog, because that's too heavy for him. Then the deaths that he sees day to day, may have weighed on him too heavily at this point. And he very well could have left and actually killed himself.
Well, you look at it too. It's not an oncology doctor, I'm sure, is not a happy job. It's, rewarding when you win some of those, but not only is he an oncology doctor, he is a pediatric oncology doctor. So I was like, damn. And then it showed, the fact that he was dealing with that kid, and then the kid did not have a good prognosis, did not seem like it was going to make it. And this is not a they talk about it in like one of my organization's suicide prevention something or other classes. The people who let on the people who turn everything into a joke a lot of times are those people who are the most depressed. And throughout the beginning of this uh, show, he was making a joke about everything. He was talking about putting the violin up the orchestra teacher's butt, like it's called his up his rose bum. Was that
Mr.
it was
Rosebombs.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like it was a lot of like dad jokes. It was really funny, but he was very quick, and everything he said was a joke. But I think that was his way of dealing with his very stressful, sad job. So, like you said, Larry, what happens if that kid was the final straw? It was just too much.
The last thing I have as far as the story is she had a husband, and everybody's pointing the blame. Elena had a husband, and so people are like, "Oh, well, was it he that It's always the husband. It's always the husband." And then I immediately thought, "Well, no, it's not." But then there's a line where in the previews where he turns himself in, so clearly there's more going on there. Whether or not somebody's paying him to do it, or that he just has some weird guilt trip and he just says screw it and does it anyways. I don't know. We'll learn that later. But
Well,
we didn't really get to see him speak in this episode, but clearly he's going to play a role in the story.
Yeah, but when you turn yourself in, he was just wanted for questioning. Him
that's what I
not.
was thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he might not be like turned in because he was guilty of killing anybody. He turned himself in because they're looking for me. He's like, oh fuck, they're looking for me. So, turning yourself in when it's just wanted for questioning, not, there's not a warrant out for his arrest. But if he doesn't come to the police station there shortly after and talk to Jake Peralta there, he gets a little hairy there pretty quickly, I'm sure. And it was Mendoza. I know that. I was making a
Yeah.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine reference.
That's all I have. Anything else?
It was Precinct 23, I think he said.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it all. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
definitely got me in a place where I'm I definitely am curious about what happens in the next episode. And like I said, we got a lot of breadcrumbs. So we got a decent build up and introduction to the characters and where we're going with this story. But it's clearly just the tip of the iceberg. We have very little information at this point, and so just kind of curious to see where it goes.
well, that's what I was just getting ready to say. When they mentioned you just said very little information. What kind of studio was she at? He kept saying she's at the studio or whatever. I'm not sure what she did. I didn't see the front of the building. I didn't know if it was a dance studio, because if it's a dance studio, then it kind of points the finger at the one mom who is, talking shit to her kid. That that ballerina, she was kind of smiling when she was, talking to her mom. So, implications of maybe she was a jealous wife because she was sleeping with her husband. Like, there's a lot of question marks as to who Elena was. And then when you look at her, the murder, like her face was fucked up. It's not just like a robbery where she got, shot or something. Like her face was like bludgeoned. So, and there was blood everywhere. So I'm thinking that whoever did it, it was personal. And I don't know who yet. And, I'm guessing Grace just because of the tidbits that they gave us so far. But whoever it was a personal attack.
Definitely.
But that was it.
Uh,
That's all. It's just
5 weeks. It is based off of a book. So if you've read the book, please don't, spoil the book in the comments.
yeah. Please don't.
If because I don't know if it's identical or not plot wise, but yeah, looking forward to the next 5 weeks, seeing how this thing plays out. If you were one of our viewers for Perry Mason, we're gonna do as we did with that. We're gonna make our predictions the further we get in. So yeah, looking forward to that. As I said earlier, a lot of other content on the channel. Be sure to check that out. Fargo. If you're not listening to our Fargo review or watching Fargo, what are you doing? You need to watch Fargo. Listen to our review. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye.